Number 10. Louise. Louise is not a major character in terms of being a huge mutant or key villain to mutants in the current series, but she is someone who will likely end up becoming a close friend and ally of Wolverine's. She first appeared in issue number 1 of the newest Wolverine series that started in 2020. I actually remember reading that first issue when I was in New York City right before the world went crazy. Oh my, what a time. Memories. Louise is a member of the Night Guard, and while she dropped off after issue 1, as we keep coming back to Dracula and the vampire nations going ons in the Wolverine series, she too has resurfaced. Louise was given a suit by Forge to help slow her transformation into a vampire after she and her Night Guard were attacked and either killed or turned. She once more teamed up with Logan as they went head to head with Dracula and his loyal subjects, and likely she'll be back again as this slow burning story continues to be developed. In fact, I think this is going to be like the big story before the end of this current Wolverine series, whenever we get there. Number 9. Cyclops Lass. So Cyclops Lass might not be one of the most important characters on this list, but I still think she is a character you should get to know because, well, she's just a cool character. I really like Cyclops Lass. Cyclops Lass is Beatrice Buddy Bartholomew and is the leader of the Children of the Atom. By the way, it took me a minute to realize when I first heard of this fan-composed mutant-inspired teen hero team's name that their group name was another phrase used for mutants and even the X-Men back in the day. It's pretty cool when you realize that. Neat stuff. Cyclops Lass appears to have powers similar to the X-Men member and often leader, Cyclops, but in reality we learned that it was actually alien tech which gave her team their powers, allowing them to appear like mutants and like some of their favorite X-Men members. Still, Buddy is a cool character, and while Children of the Atom has ended, I do hope we get to see more of its team members. Buddy made her first cameo appearance in Marvel's Voices issue number 1 and her full appearance in Children of the Atom issue number 1. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list, if you want more mutant lists, please let us know by hitting that like button. It really does help us out at the channel, and it lets us know that you want more X lists, which honestly I like giving you all the X-Men things, so yes, let's do it. Number 8. Cosmar. Cosmar is one of the new mutants, if that makes sense. She first appeared in issue number 9 of the newest series from 2020. Currently there are 2 different groups of new mutants in that series, the one based on the mutant island nation of Krakoa, who are truly feeling those outcast vibes right now, and currently are like the Shadow King's lost mutant kids, and the other traditional new mutant team who is more focused on space adventures and other international exploits. When Cosmar's powers first manifested, it resulted in the death of her parents. Her powers cause her to suck people into her nightmares, as she creates a reality warping sphere surrounding her. All those who touch or interact with it run the risk of being sucked in. And I believe Forge actually made her a suit as well, as Forge is just making everybody little things to help them with their powers, to help her sort of control those powers so that they wouldn't be so disastrous. Number 7. Gimmick. Gimmick is a new mutant who first appeared and had her powers manifest in Children of the Atom. She was the one member of the team who actually ended up making it to Krakoa due to the fact that she was a real mutant, in addition to also being a major fangirl of the X-Men. But aside from her being a mutant, Carmen Cruz is also good friends with the fellow Children of the Atom, with Cyclops Lass, aka Buddy, probably being her best friend on the team and also her secret crush who she's in love with. Another thing that I love about Carmen is that she also is the person that makes all the costumes on the team, and she's super into cosplay, which I just think is like super cool and super cute. We don't have a lot of characters in the comics that are cosplayers, so I really liked that element. Gimmick's powers appeared initially to be similar to Gambit's, but this was all done using alien technology. In reality, when Carmen's mutant powers manifested, it was revealed that they were shape-shifting in nature and also granted her a healing factor. Carmen made her first cameo appearance in 2020 in Marvel's Voices issue 1, but would appear fully in the first issue of Children of the Atom the following year in 2021. Also, when she did have her Gambit powers, it was pretty cool because she was like throwing basically little like clothing pins, if that makes sense, at people, which I love. Number 6. Maxim and Manon. Maxim and Manon are relatively new characters and mutants who appeared within the last year, but we also now potentially have a different version of them in the current X books. They're likely from a different continuity due to what we learned during the Dawn of X period of the current line. There's like a version of them, I think that's like 616, and then there's a version of them that doesn't actually have a reality number officially yet, but yes. Maxim and Manon, as we see them in the current timeline, are a brother and sister who together can heavily manipulate and warp the minds of others. Maxim can manipulate the emotions of his target, and Manon can manipulate and alter their memories, making the two a powerful duo when working in tandem. Maxim and Manon once served Ahab, being brainwashed into using their powers to make hounds for him. However, they would later be freed by Jean Grey, and Cable would convince her to look after them. Maxim and Manon are currently relevant because in the New Mutants series, they use their powers to make two humans attack one another and fight to the death, which is against Krakoan law. Ooh. However, nothing seems to have come from them taking this extreme action just yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if it comes around at some point. Number 5. Bay the Blood Moon. Bay the Blood Moon is an awesome new character who made her first appearance in the Ten of Swords event back in the second main book from the event, Ten of Swords Stasis. She was one of the Arakko mutants who was called to compete in the Otherworld tournament, fighting to represent her nation. However, her fight actually ended up being a marriage. Basically, the Otherworld tournament was gloriously weird because it was being led by Saturnine, so we had traditional sword fights combined with lots of different kinds of battles, including puzzle solving duels, food eating competitions, dance-offs, and even an arranged marriage. However, it also all worked out as Cypher and Bay were seemingly both enamored with the other, as they were both masters of language and communication, but who struggled to understand one another, which fascinated them both, especially Cypher. They were both married and were each awarded a point, as it was considered a shared victory for both sides. Also, the art in the issue of Excalibur where they get married is just so good. It's so great. I love it. Number 4. Chen Zhao. Chen is not a mutant, nor is she an ally to mutant kind. She is just the opposite, their enemy. After coming up against the Marauders, trying to inspire mutant hate in her people as a public figurehead, billionaire, and anti-mutant activist, she ended up allying herself with Hum and his Verendi. Still hell-bent on destroying mutant kind's reputation as heroes, and now especially focused on doing harm to the band of mutant heroes that we know as the Marauders. Chen Zhao made her first appearance back in 2019 in Marauders issue 1, which once again, if you haven't read any of this comic, why not go back and start with that first issue in Chen's first appearance. Currently, Chen is Hum and his Verendi's White Bishop, and she's definitely a villain that I think is going to be more prominent and keep getting like more badass, which I love. Number 3. Dolores Ramirez. Dolores Ramirez is another non-mutant, but someone who is a very important character within and around the X-Men universe currently. She is the head of the X-Desk, and no, I don't mean that she worked with Jonathan Hickman to bring our current line of X-books to life. Within Earth 616, she is the one who presides over the United States government X-Desk, which monitors, keeps tabs on, and ultimately kind of spies on the mutant nation of Krakoa and its major players and political stratagems. The X-Desk is a department within the CIA. Dolores once offered to help fellow CIA agent Jeff Bannister, ally of Wolverine, who had been working with him, but he turned her down. Dolores was also one of the lucky few to get an invite to the Hellfire Gala, and met with Storm in secret during her first appearance in Marauders issue 11, where she was rewarded for leaking some important information about poisoned medicine to the mutants. So while she's watching them, she also kind of seems pretty friendly. Number 2. Arakko. Arakko is both an island and a mutant, just like Krakoa. In fact, there was a time when both Krakoa and Arakko were joined together, but years ago they were separated. Arakko made their first appearance in Powers of X issue number 4, and later on we learn of all that went on there with the island, including the mutants who inhabited it and their connection to a vastly important mutant, Apocalypse. Following the Ten of Swords event, Arakko attempted to reunite with Krakoa, but both islands decided, they were no longer really interested in one another, and the time had basically changed them. They reluctantly rejoined until a more suitable option was found for Arakko and the mutants of Krakoa. In planet-size X-Men, some of the mutants banded together under the direction of Magneto to terraform Mars and move Arakko and its inhabitants, the mutants of Arakko, to the now alive planet. That's what happens when you terraform a planet, you bring it to life again. I actually didn't know that Mars was considered a dead planet until I read Planet-Size X-Men, and I was like, wow, I feel like I'm also learning some science facts, which is great. Number 1. Genesis. One of the most badass of all the new characters we've gotten recently in the world of X-Men. Genesis is the long-lost wife of Apocalypse, who also was one of the main leaders of Arakko. She ended up fighting against Annihilation and becoming its new host in order to save her people. Uniting both the Amenthi and the mutants descendants of Arakko. Donning the mask, she became a leader of the Amenthi demon army, but also lost a part of herself in the process, as the Annihilation mask possessed and corrupted her. However, during the Ten of Swords tournament, she fought against her husband Apocalypse, who managed to free her from the golden helm of Annihilation, taking it for himself. But Apocalypse's will proved strong enough to resist its influence, and the mask was then transformed by Saturnine into a much less influential and corrupting staff, which was then gifted to Genesis. Genesis made her first full appearance in the 2019 X-Men series in issue number 12, but we wouldn't learn that she was Annihilation until much later. Number 10. Skin. I love me some Gen X mutants, which is why you know I need to talk about Skin on this list. Skin is a mutant whose mutation is basically just a bunch of extra skin. In the comics, it actually took a while for Angelo to be able to embrace his abilities, as he basically resented his powers and being a mutant. However, as time went on, he came to accept them and even became quite good at utilizing his extra skin and using it as a cool power. He could even use it to change the appearance of his shape and face, becoming somewhat of a shapeshifter. While Angelo Espinoza can stretch his skin, it should be noted that his skeleton does not change, making his power kind of a weird and unique one. Skin is also known for having literally thick skin that is more durable than most, as well as more elastic. Number 9. Husk. Paige Guthrie might not be one of the main heroes that you think of when you think X-Men, but for a time she was actually a close-knit part of that team, and even had a controversial romantic relationship with fellow X-Men member Angel, who, even though we don't talk about him as much, is one of the original members. So yeah, I even thought of putting him on this list just because we never talk about him, but I was like, wow, that would be mad disrespect to Angel, so I couldn't do it. I can't lie, I'm actually really excited for the X-Corp series just because I am ready for Angel's return to the spotlight. Paige's powers are fairly unique in that she can shed her skin to reveal a new layer of skin made out of a different material beneath it. This new outer layer of skin can be made of anything that she wants it to be, such as wood, rubber, or even diamonds. Diamond skin is so cool. Just taking a page of Emma Frost's book there. Love it. Number 8. Hellion. So yeah, the early 2000s saw us go through a mutant boom. A boom that likely led to the events of House of M, which was probably used from a practical standpoint to kind of remove a good number of mutants, because it was just getting so out of hand with keeping track of all of these different mutants. We had so many. Too many maybe. Just kidding, you can never have too many mutants. Hellion was a part of this boom, and he took inspiration for his codename from his mentor Emma Frost's fallen group of mutants, the Hellions. Julian Keller is likely a mutant associated with the X-Men that we don't talk about as often because, well, he's kind of a jerk, and he's not as much of a lovable jerk as someone like Sunspot, so yeah. Julian possesses a unique version of telekinesis in that his powers are far more advanced and allow him to take control on a seemingly molecular level of different objects. They also come with a super cool color as well. Everything he does is green with his powers. Unfortunately, when emotions get in the way of these powers, this level of telekinesis results in him sometimes combusting objects by accident or simply in anger. Hellion has made a return in Krakoa and has appeared in a few comics, but hasn't become a main member of any of the prominent teams featured there just yet. I personally think it'd be cool to see Hellion on the Hellions, but I don't know if he's messed up enough to be on the Hellions. Number 7. Mercury. Mercury is another mutant to come from the bunch that Hellion was a part of. Julian was actually her first friend that she made when she arrived at the Xavier Institute. Mercury's, or Cecily Kincaid's, parents had sent their daughter there after her powers first manifested, ashamed that she was a mutant. Eventually they would actually end up disowning her after they themselves were pulled into a mutant conflict. Mercury's powers allow her to turn her skin into liquid metal, which she can then control, reform, and use to shapeshift with. This form is of course made up of non-toxic mercury, which is where she gets her codename from. Mercury was also one of the few mutants to keep her powers following the events of M-Day. In fact, I have quite a few of those on my list. Not all of them, but a few of them. Number 6. Darwin. Darwin has some of the coolest abilities, and yet he isn't often easily recognized as being one of the main members of the X-Men, even though he's been a part of the team for quite some time in the comics. For a long time he was actually stuck bonded to Vulcan, as he was part of one of the first teams of X-Men Xavier and Moira ever had. I don't know if we called that team the X-Men, but they're basically another squad of X-Men in my mind, so. He was part of the first team sent in to rescue the X-Men from Krakoa, though we wouldn't find out about that team in terms of comic book history till many years after after the events of the X-Men's printed fight against the mutant living island. Darwin's powers allow him to evolve as needed to ensure his survival. This basically makes him almost immortal, as he can evolve to resolve almost any life-threatening situation. Recently, in the current X-Men run in issue number 5, this is why Darwin was chosen to be one of the team members to be sent into the vault after Serafina, as it wasn't known how long the team sent in would be locked within that place where time moves more quickly in comparison to Earth. I feel like they also just came out recently, but I haven't read that issue yet, so no spoilers. Number 5. Trance. Trance is another mutant who is affiliated with the X-Men and even tried out to become an X-Men in training under Emma Frost, following the events of House of M. She was one of the lucky few, or unlucky few I guess depending on your perspective, to remain powered. Hope Abbott, or Trance, possesses the power to leave her physical body, becoming ghost-like in appearance on panel, but in reality she's just astral projecting. In other words, she's not as powerful as some other mutants who are able to astral project as, you know, part of their larger set of powers, generally being telepathic or telekinetic in origin. But hey, not everyone can astral project, so I still think this is pretty cool. I also like when people don't have like crazy awesome powerful things and then you still have to see them like try to figure out, how do I use this in a way that's cool and, you know, good, so I can be on the same level. I think that's cooler to read, but that's just me. Number 4. Stacy X. Although Stacy X hasn't made a ton of appearances, she is a memorable character due to her, interesting and sensual abilities. Former abilities, I guess I should say. We don't really know if she has been returned to the status of a mutant, but we do know that she has joined the mutant nation of Krakoa now. So considering that when we last saw her, she was missing those abilities that she used to have in her former appearance, I assume that she has participated in the Crucible, was killed by the mutant formerly known as Apocalypse, and has been resurrected as her former self. But also, there are a lot of people in line to just be returned to us, and I'm sure there's a lot of people in line to participate in the Crucible to earn their powers back, so who knows? Who knows where she is in that long line. Also, Apocalypse is no longer on the island following the events of Ten of Swords, so there is that. I don't know who's running the Crucible now. Who is like the replacement Apocalypse. Stacy X was part of the X-Men for a brief period after being rescued by them from her place of work, which was attacked and destroyed by the Church of Humanity. Stacy X used her powers at her place of employment to help make clients who came through feel good and grant them sensations of pleasure. She can also use her pheromone powers in combat to make her opponents feel not so good, manipulating their bodily functions. She makes you feel sick. Blech. Number 3. Loa. Loa is one of the resurrected mutants to rejoin us on Krakoa, reborn again. While you may not know her as well as some of the others, she has a long and storied past with both the X-Men, her fellow mutants, good pals Rockslide and Match, and even with Namor. In fact, Namor was the one who came to save the day after she first discovered her powers. Loa's abilities allow her to pass through other matter and in so doing destroy it on a molecular level. She discovered she had these powers when her dad was attacked by a shark while they were surfing together, and she passed through it, destroying it. Namor would later come to her and her father's rescue before the situation could escalate, and it was later revealed that her grandmother was actually an old friend of Namor's. Since then, she also gained the ability to breathe underwater after being exposed to the Atlantean amulet. The amulet also allows Loa's physiology to adapt so that she can survive in the depths of the ocean easily. Number 2. Match. You might know the Pyros, but do you know Match? Match is Ben Hamill, one of the mutants to appear in the new X-Men series, but making his first appearance in New Mutants. His powers are pyrokinesis, hence his name. It basically gives him control over fire, which he himself can generate, and also helps to make him immune to fire attacks and heat. Match is now not as hot on the radar, but was for a time the leader of the X-Men adjacent team, the Paragon Squad. He also participated in a competition for a place on Emma Frost's X-Men team, and has attended both the Xavier Institute and the Jean Grey School for Higher Learning. I'm not sure if it's of or for, because of feels weird to me, but I think it is right. It's of or for, it's one of those. Number 1. Lifeguard. Lifeguard is Heather Cameron, a mutant who, as a response to life-threatening danger, gains the skills and powers necessary to save those lives around her. This power, or powers, not only works for her in regards to saving others, but also is a reactive power that applies to saving her own life, meaning she can get out of pretty much almost any kind of dangerous situation that she puts herself in. Before lifeguard was her codename, it was actually her profession, as she worked as a lifeguard in Australia where she lived with her brother Davis. Eventually, it was also implied in the comics that she has unknown Shi'ar heritage. We've seen her resurface in Dawn of X, popping up in Krakoa at the Green Lagoon bar, but it would also be super cool to see her play more of a prominent role at some point in the comics, as her powers are pretty neat and definitely super useful. But maybe too powerful? Maybe that's why we haven't seen her as much, like Hope.
Kicking off the list at number 10. Juggernaut. Cain Marko made his first comic book appearance in X-Men issue 12, when Cain and Charles Xavier were serving together in the same unit, but when Cain was under fire, he ran off to take cover in a nearby cave. The cave was actually home to the lost temple of Cyttorak. So Cain grabbed this glowing ruby from the lap of an idol. Apparently he's never seen an Indiana Jones movie. He read the inscription. Apparently he's never seen a horror movie. And he possessed the power of the Crimson Bands of Cyttorak, becoming a human Juggernaut. Then an explosion went off, and then Cain the Juggernaut was now trapped under the rubble, and Xavier just took off. So after Cain dug himself out, he destroyed an entire village, with the previous man who had held the Juggernaut mantle, Jin Taiko, being destroyed as well. Now at one point he joined the X-Men and accepted Xavier's offer to live at the Xavier's school. After a young boy he befriended named Sammy meets his fate, Cain embraces the Cyttorak energies once again and went back to his villain ways. And before we go on to number 9, if you guys could go ahead and give this video a thumbs up, that would be great. It helps the studio out quite a bit. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much for watching. Now back to this X-Men list. Number 9, Mystique. Raven Darkholme made her first comic book debut in Miss Marvel issue 16 back in 1978. So she's been around for quite a while, although most of her history is quite secretive. Her powers are quite interesting and first came to be when she was around 12 years old. Now one of those powers being of course that she can metamorph. So she could shapeshift into literally anybody, doesn't matter what size, age, gender, whatever the case. She's so good at shapeshifting and becoming somebody else that she can even copy your retina patterns and of course your fingerprints. So she can definitely get into your phone in numerous ways. She constantly betrays the X-Men. She's so flippy floppy. She joins the team for selfish reasons and then she leaves all over again. It's part of the thing. Number 8, Colossus. Making his first debut in Giant Size X-Men issue 1, Colossus grew up in Russia with his brother Miko and sister Alina. And when a runaway tractor was about to take out Alina, he saved her life with his powers. And then of course that got the attention of Charles Xavier. So he joined Charles in his school, and then when the legacy virus took the life of Alina, that plus the fact that he was stuck in this giant metal mode, stuck in the X-Men mansion, it was his mental breaking point. He tipped to the dark side. He left and figured the best place to be was with the Acolytes, with Magneto and Avalon. Number 7, Wolverine. Wolverine has had a pretty crazy past, so it's no surprise that he's gone down a few dark roads in his time. In the movie Logan, for example, we see two Wolverines battle it out and it's so gory and so wonderful. But in the comic Age of Apocalypse, Logan goes from being an X-Men to the Horseman of Death. Yeah, Apocalypse actually had Wolverine square up against Sabretooth in order to see who becomes this new Horseman. Wolverine came out on top and Apocalypse restored the adamantium to his skeleton. Upgrade time, let's do it. And to make matters worse, Apocalypse replaced Wolverine with a scroll so the X-Men wouldn't notice. Now of course there's many more X-Men who have become Horsemen of the Apocalypse, such as number 6, Gambit. Making his first appearance in Uncanny X-Men 266, Remy LeBeau was a mutant child who was kidnapped from the hospital by members of the New Orleans Thieves Guild. So off the bat, not a happy start to his life. They referred to him as the White Devil. So before he joined the X-Men, he had a pretty shady past, and after he had become a member, it was revealed that before he had worked for Mr. Sinister, and Gambit was actually the one who was responsible for putting the Marauders into the New York sewers where the Mutant Massacre happened. So, okay. He was also one of Apocalypse's 4 horsemen, like I said previously. He took the place of the Horseman Death, and he even refused any sedation during this process in order to make sure Apocalypse doesn't toy with his mind. What a badass. Dude's hardcore. His original plan during this was to keep an eye on Apocalypse from the inside, but the transformation did alter his intentions as well. He ended up rescuing his old self when he remembered his love for Rogue, and he claimed he was both Death and Gambit at the same time. What a troubled man. Number 5, Bishop. Lucas Bishop. He is a time traveler from a dystopian future, and his goal was to travel back in time to the past in order to stop an unknown traitor amongst the X-Men. Interesting, very interesting. So he's come from that dark future to change it. Sounds like a good way to mix things up, that's for sure. Now this was when most of the mutant population is depowered by the Scarlet Witch. Then the child Hope was born, the first mutant born since. Well, it turns out that this kid is the reason Bishop is going back. See, that kid would end up taking millions of lives in the 6-second war. So Bishop tries to take out the child, which makes him the traitor all along. Time travel hurts my head, oh my god. So Cable, another time traveler from a different future, protects Hope. Bishop fails at taking out Hope, but he does take down Cable, creating a new future where Cable is remembered as a hero for protecting the child, and Bishop was remembered as the villain. That's tragic and also very confusing. Number 4, Archangel. Warren Worthington III. He started out as the accustomed hero known as the Avenging Angel. And then once Xavier got his attention, he recruited him as the third of the 5 founding members of the X-Men, alongside Cyclops, Iceman, Beast, and Marvel Girl. He developed a pair of feathered wings that grew out of his back, giving him the ability, of course, to fly. He became a member of X-Factor alongside other X-Men, but he lost his wings thanks to Cameron Hodge. See, Apocalypse saw this and he took advantage of the hero. He brainwashed him and turned him into Archangel, the first horseman of death in the comics. He eventually broke free of Apocalypse's control, but over the years he would flip-flop back and forth into the evil hands of Apocalypse. He at one point actually had almost replaced Apocalypse after his death. Yeah, he's a force you do not want to mess with. Number 3, Cyclops. Scott Summers has been a leader of the X-Men since the beginning. He carries the knowledge that Xavier gifted him when he was a teenager. He was always struggling to control his powers growing up, and his history is pretty tragic. So when Scott and Emma became the new co-headmasters of the school, Cyclops led the X-Men, and he was doing a pretty good job. He was working to destroy this negative image that the public gave the X-Men. And as time went on, the X-Men name was being tarnished, so he thought it was best to separate mutants from humanity. Yeah, he thought he'd separate them and then rule the mutants on an island nation known as Utopia. Magneto even gives him props for uniting all the mutants. I mean, this is a big deal for him. This starts going south in the Schism storyline, where Cyclops sends out child soldiers on these assassination missions. He has the mindset that mutants need to train to be soldiers rather than students, but they're like 12 years old, so it's like, okay. Eventually the team gets divided and Scott ends up taking on the powers of the Phoenix Force, fighting the Avengers and taking out Xavier, resulting in him being imprisoned. Number 2, Magneto. Making his first appearance in X-Men 1 back in 1963, Magneto is a mutant with the ability to generate and control magnetic fields. He's a master of magnetism. He was a close friend with Professor X, but of course they came to a disagreement over the idea that humans and mutants could coexist peacefully. Like I just mentioned, he was a fan of when they got divided. He gave Scott Summers props for doing this, so he's clearly on board with this idea. And obviously his horrible childhood makes a fair point for said argument. He always believed that mutants were superior to humans. He was the one who created the Brotherhood of Mutants and the Acolytes. He worked with the X-Men before. See, when Professor X needed to leave Earth, Magneto stepped in to take his place and teach his students how to use their powers. After this, he became a hero in a way. He was guiding these new mutants. But again, he's one of those villains that constantly flips back and forth in the comics, and I'm really hoping he somehow is the one responsible for all this madness in WandaVision. After all, now that Quicksilver is somehow in the picture from the Fox universe, one can only hope we'll see some more X-Men, and one can only wish that Magneto will come through and maybe give his daughter a little talking to. And finally, number 1, Jean Grey. The Dark Phoenix, of course, she is number 1. Jean Grey is an Omega level mutant born with telekinetic and telepathic powers. She was also one of the OG members of the X-Men. Now, seeing the potential in Jean's strength, the Phoenix Force attached itself to her while she was in danger during a space mission with the Fantastic Four. It's X-Men 101. Like literally, the issue is X-Men 101. Dark Phoenix has now entered the chat. So much power. Okay, this dark, powerful cosmic force started to change her for the worse. She ended up destroying a solar system that, kind of killed billions. And then she took her own life in order to keep the universe safe. Now, a few years later, it was revealed that it wasn't actually the Jean Grey that had died. No, just the Phoenix as a separate entity that had taken over her mind and all that jazz. The Phoenix Saga is one of the biggest transformations to an X-Men member, and we even got to see all this go down on screen. Now, of course, we'd have to put her at number 1. Kicking off the list at number 10, we have Multiple Man. James Madrox. He made his first comic book appearance in Giant Size Fantastic Four, issue 4, and right off the bat, he seems very soft-spoken. He seems very gentle. I mean, the Thing is yelling at him, and he's literally like, "Why do you reject me? Why?" Like, he's so almost poetic in a way. And then when the Thing goes to clobber him, bam, there's multiple more men. Now, he wasn't used very much in the X-Men, but he spent most of his days with X-Factor. But this guy is underrated. His powers may seem kind of weak compared to somebody like Jean Grey, but these duplicates can each make a duplicate.
Let me something. I'm Mr. Meeseeks. Look at me. I'm Mr. Meeseeks. I'm Mr. Meeseeks. Look at me. Hi.
At one point, this guy had 40 of him running around town. 40. Now, the duplicates think, they feel, and they act independently, but they're guided by the original James Madrox. In a way, they're guided. They kind of know what to do. Each of these duplicates manifests one aspect of James' personality, and the longer the time away, the more those traits become extreme. And if one of these duplicates passed away, he can sense that the general area where the body is, which is like the saddest radar ever. This guy could take over the world if he wanted. It would be like that scene from The Matrix, but with more monologues probably. And before we go on to this list of X-Men you probably wouldn't expect to be that powerful, guys, if you want to go ahead and give this video a thumbs up, just right there, just give it a little tap tap, and it helps our studio out quite a bit. You guys are the best. Thank you so much for watching. Let's get back to the list. Lickety split. Number 9, Darwin. We saw this next mutant for a hot minute in X-Men First Class. He was played by Eddie Guthrie, who unfortunately didn't survive too long. See, he threw his life down on the line in order to protect his fellow X-Men. And this was still in the early days too. What a champ. He first showed up in the comics in 2005 with X-Men Deadly Genesis issue 2. Armando Munoz looked a lot different than we saw on screen as well. Since he was 4 years old, he was bald, his arms were super long, and his eyes were changing. He sure looks a little bit different than the young, handsome actor that we saw in the movie. His ability comes in handy a lot actually, more so in the X-Men movies. See, in the comics, he's practically immortal. His ability once allowed him to survive Hela's death touch. I mean, it's a little bit different than the last time we saw him, that's for sure. Number 8, Caliban. An albino mutant and former member of the Morlocks, Caliban made his first comic book appearance in Uncanny X-Men 148. So he has the ability to track down any mutant. He actually sacrifices himself in the movie Logan, where Stephen Merchant played him. He was also in X-Men Apocalypse for a bit too, played by a different actor. He was played by Tomas Lamarcus. He was originally an ally to the X-Men, but once he became a tracker for Apocalypse in X-Factor issue 24, titled The Fall of the Mutants. So he's pretty powerful, and he's done a lot of cool stuff too. He may seem like a gentle, lanky, pale man, but when Caliban is stressed out in the comics, he gains 2 additional powers: super strength and fear absorption. So if you put him in a corner, he'll be able to absorb the psionic energy in your fear and use it to power himself up even more. Number 7, Glob Herman, aka Robert Herman, although Glob is much more fun to say. He made his debut in New X-Men issue 117, and he grew up with a father who despised mutants, so already he's off to a pretty rocky start. So when Glob mutated, his father was just not on board, so his mother drove Glob out to Westchester and just left him for Professor X. Like you leave a baby at a fire station, it's just like, yep, here you go, your problem now. This mutation was interesting. So his skin was this transparent living wax, which he's able to maintain being on fire, which is pretty amazing off the bat. You can light him on fire and he's good to go. That's amazing. He runs with the New Mutants now, and although his name is silly and he's literally a glob, he can also possess powers of super strength and super speed, despite how he may look. So he can get hit by these massive bombs like it's nothing, then he can fight whoever launched that bomb with ease. The X-Men literally once used him as a heat shield once. They strapped Glob to the front of their ship, and it didn't seem pleasant for a man Glob, but he was good. He didn't die or anything. He had to rest for a bit. Number 6, Toad. When you think of the name Toad in relation to a superhero, you're gonna picture something pretty silly in your head. And Mortimer Toynbee isn't that far off from what you'd think. He made his first appearance in Uncanny X-Men issue 4. So he hops around, which seems silly, but his legs are so strong that he can leg press 3 tons. And it's not just his legs that are strong, his upper half possesses superhuman strength as well. His arms can lift about 1 ton. He also has flexible bone structure, regenerative healing factor, infrared vision, and the best part, his 30-foot long tongue can also act as a whip. And it can secrete venom that can give him mind control over your body, and his saliva is acid as well. Number 5, Wither. Making his first appearance in New Mutants Volume 2, Issue 3, Kevin Ford grew up thinking that he was cursed, or he was the most unlucky person ever, one or the two. See, his mutant power started manifesting, and then he noticed it first in his plants, and then he noticed it in his clothes, and then he noticed it in people. So what would happen is his plants would wither. They would wither and they would die. And then his clothes were starting to decay as well. So once his father figures out this mutation, he tries to calm him down, but coming into contact with him, obviously the inevitable happens. He sees the world in this lifeless or decaying way now. See, it's part of this mutation. He can disintegrate all forms of organic matter just by one touch. Whatever he touches withers, so now we get his name. It turns into dust within seconds, whatever it is. Now this seems boring, I guess. When you think of it in like a cinematic battle, it's not too exciting. But this guy can take out an entire elite squad just by touching them. I mean, realistically, just send him in always. No one's gonna expect it. All you have to do is get him to fist bump everybody and then bam, just like that. No more bad guys. Number 4, Nocturne. This next one, she comes from Earth 2182, where she's the daughter of Nightcrawler and Scarlet Witch. Now, she's got her dad's looks, unfortunately. She's blue, furry, she's got 3 fingers and 3 toes. She's got a tail and yellow eyes and pointed ears. Now, sure, she looks like she can take out any bad guy, like she looks like an alien. So she possesses the powers of both of her parents. She can blast off energy bolts, she can climb walls, but what makes her even more powerful is that she has the ability to possess others for 12 hours, or 1 lunar cycle. But once that timer is up, the victim is just completely out of it for 24 hours, just comatose. This super offspring packs a super punch, that's for sure. Number 3, Tattoo. Christine Cord made her comic book debut in the new X-Men issue 126. She was a student of the Xavier Institute, and she's known as Tattoo, well, because her mutation allows her to display messages or designs on her skin, and she can phase through matter, which is also kind of fun. She's pretty awesome. I mean, when you first think of her, you may just think of the skin messages and be like, oh, whatever, maybe she's a spy, maybe she can be like, send help and then use her skin. Cool, that's good. But check this out. Tattoo actually phased her hand into Cyclops' head once and told him that if she becomes solid, he would not survive to see the end of it. How awesome is that? But she sadly lost her powers during the events of M-Day, but if you ever ran into Christine again, she would probably surprise you with her new ability. When she was released from jail, she joined the New Warriors and was given her own Stiltman armor, becoming Longstrike. So bam! 2 in 1. Talk about underrated. Number 2, Banshee. The Screaming Banshee. Okay, he made his first appearance in X-Men issue 28. Sean Cassidy was born as the heir to the castle and estate of Cassidy Keep, Ireland. Now, Professor Xavier asked him to join the X-Men at the same time as Thunderbird, and they both stayed as members of the new X-Men. Now, he went on to train the new generation of X-Men and Generation X, but he sadly lost his life during Deadly Genesis when he was trying to stop Blackbird from crashing when it was taken over. So when you think of an X-Men who screams so loud he can hurt people, it's impressive on its own, sure, but his screams are actually stronger than we really think. His screams can actually break through an inch of steel. And with these wings that Professor X developed for him, he's able to harness this power and use his screams as energy to help him fly. So he can do so much more with his voice as well. He can tighten the sound waves around himself to make a sonic shield, and he can influence your subconscious by changing the tones and vibrations of his voice. He can literally change your mind. How awesome is that? What do you mean you want a divorce? And finally, number 1, we have my favorite on the list, Bailey Hoskins. Okay, I have to talk about this poor kid. Okay, strongest X-Men you wouldn't expect? Yeah, that is for sure Bailey Hoskins. The only appearance of this kid is in the 2016 miniseries X-Men, Worst X-Man Ever, which is a pretty cruel name. He was a student at Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters, and his power is pretty spectacular. He can self-detonate, he can make himself explode, and you would never expect it just by looking at him. I mean, come on. He reminds me of Hogarth from the Iron Giant. He's such a cute kid. The thing is, he can only use this fantastic ability once. And his last issue in the comics was X-Men Worst X-Man Ever, issue 5.
Number 10, Hepzibah. Despite not being a mutant, Hepzibah became a member of the mainly mutant team of the X-Men after leaving the Starjammers. Initially, she was Corsair's lover, but after being forced to part ways with the Starjammers, she would end up on Earth and join the X-Men team. Hepzibah's abilities come from her own skill set and from her alien physiology. Hepzibah is a Mephistoid, the member of an anthropomorphic skunk-like alien race. After the loss of Corsair, Hepzibah would end up becoming closer to fellow X-Men member Warpath, and would even become his lover as well in the comics. It's fine, Corsair was dead at the time. While Hepzibah was a member of the X-Men and even was recruited for a time to be on X-Force, she eventually would return to the Starjammers once her lover, Corsair, also Cyclops' Havoc's and Vulcan's father, had returned from the dead. Number 9, Egg. While Fabio Medina might be more easily recognized now that he is part of the all-important mutant team known as the Five, responsible for resurrecting fallen mutants, when he was known by his former codename name of Gold Balls, he would have been much less recognizable. Also, if you haven't been reading the comics for a while, you might not know that he's important now. That sounds so mean. He was important before, but he's really important now, you know what I mean? Fabio's power allows him to produce and shoot, well, gold balls from his body, each one firing off with a poink sound. However, since his time as Gold Balls, it was more recently revealed during the dawn of X that the balls he was producing were in actuality unfertile eggs. With this revelation, he took up the name Egg and became part of the 5 most important mutants on the island nation of Krakoa. As with this newly understood power, he could create eggs which could then be made fertile and used to regrow and resurrect fallen mutants. So, if you haven't heard of Egg or Gold Balls, he's a member you'll likely be more interested in knowing now. And before we move on to our next spot, just a quick reminder, if you love mutants as much as I love mutants, and I love them a lot, be sure you show that love by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. Beak. Beak's mutation ended up being slightly more unfortunate in comparison to some of the other, more well-known core members of the X-Men team. Beak is Barnell Husk, and his mutant powers are simply that he looks and shares similar attributes to a bird. His bones are hollow and light, meant to lend well to flying, and he has feathers which should also allow him or help him to fly, and yet he's not really a good flyer, which is kind of sad. In fact, initially Beak couldn't really fly at all when he first appeared. Now he can, but he still has to work really hard to do so, and even then he can really only fly for short distances. Other than that, Beak simply can see better than most at long range and is armed with talons and a beak, which he can obviously use to fight. But for the most part, Beak simply looks like a bird, and as such is usually more on the sidelines than in the middle of the action. He did for a while have a suit, however, that enhanced his abilities and also granted him additional strength and powers, more useful for physical fighting. Number 7. Morph. Because there are multiple morphs out there, not everyone is as familiar with Benjamin Deeds as the morph who appeared in the animated X-Men series from the 90s. This version of Morph, however, is a lot less cocky in comparison to that animated series version. Benjamin Deeds is a mutant who, like the animated version, can transform into anyone else. However, his powers are a little more unique than most shapeshifters. The more time he spends with someone, the more his appearance will grow to mimic theirs, not really becoming an exact duplicate of them, but more becoming his own version of that person, which also affects how that person sees him. Using his powers also makes the person he resembles both more eager to like and to trust Morph. And actually, initially I believe Morph didn't even like that codename. They were like, you should be Morph, and he was like, meh, nah. Number 6. Thunderbird. While we haven't seen Neil Shara in a while, he was listed as a member of the X-Men in the Ten of Swords handbook, and while it's since been revealed that the X-Men were originally made defunct after Krakoa came to be during Dawn of X, they saw their return during the denouement of the Ten of Swords event in their own series, X-Men, which had been going on since Dawn of X in the comics, comically, despite the team no longer being technically recognized by the Quiet Council. So it's really weird. It's like we had an X-Men series, but like no one acknowledged that the X-Men team existed. Anyways, they're back now, sort of. Thunderbird could also appear again at some point as part of X Corporation, as Neil has also been a part of that team in the past. While he's not the most recognizable mutant to use the codename Thunderbird, Neil is still one of those mutants. His abilities allow him to convert ambient heat into solar plasma, turning his entire body into this type of plasma, which gives him a variety of abilities and powers, including emitting focused plasma beams and flight. Number 5. Cypher. You know about Cypher, but do you know about Cypher? With an I, not with a Y. Just to be clear. Cypher is Elisa Tager and has powers similar to mutant Kitty Pryde. That is, she can phase, and even float or fly while in her phased state. She was part of the Gene School for Higher Learning and was initially discovered by mutant Cyclops, Jean Grey, and Zorn. Cypher also can turn herself invisible both visually and psychically. Well, almost completely invisible psychically. Almost. Immensely powerful telepaths such as Jean Grey have still been shown as being able to sense her. Although Cypher has only made a few appearances here and there in the comics, she still managed to make her way onto the young X-Men team and has even reappeared on Krakoa. Number 4. Ink. Ink is another member of the X-Men who technically isn't a mutant. It was believed initially that his mutant ability was to gain powers from his tattoos. However, it was later revealed that it was Eric Gitter, aka Ink's tattoo artist, who was the mutant and who basically imbued Eric with these powers using his own mutant ability. Ink's tattoo artist was Leon Nunez, a mutant with no codename really, simply being known by his name or known as the tattoo artist. Ink would be recruited as one of the young X-Men, initially believing he was working for Cyclops, but later learning he was in fact working for a disguised Donald Pierce. Ink fought alongside his fellow X-Men, but would leave the team for a time later on after discovering that he wasn't truly a mutant, when he found out where his powers really came from. When his fellow teammates needed his help, however, he would return armed with more tattoos from his artist. The Ten of Swords handbook listed him as an active member of the X-Men, so, you know. He's there, he could be back again, I don't know. I feel like I haven't seen Ink in a while, but he's out there. Number 3. Slipstream. On my previous list I talked about the mutant known as Lifeguard, but now it's time to focus on her brother, who is also a mutant, don't you know, Davis Cameron, aka Slipstream. While his sister Heather worked as an actual lifeguard in Australia, Davis himself was a surfer. His powers weren't activated until later in his life and were actually awoken by Sage after his sister went missing, and it was revealed his latent mutant abilities could be used to help find and then rescue her. Slipstream's abilities allow him to create quantum portals, which can transport him and any passengers he takes along with him across great distances. However, it should be noted it requires a lot of concentration for him to bring others along with him. He can also track previous teleportations, allowing him to use these warp wave abilities to find his way to the destination and location of teleporters that he's tracking. Which I think is a pretty useful ability, tracking teleporters, because they're tricky. Number 2. Spider-Girl. Well, not naturally born, but kinda made in a lab, Spider-Girl made a single appearance in Avenging Spider-Man issue 16. She had similar powers to Spider-Man, but was made of a combination of spider and mutant DNA by the Jackal, using materials found in Mr. Sinister's lab. Wow, the Jackal in Mr. Sinister's lab just sounds like such a dangerous thing. As such, she also had the additional powers to shapeshift into a giant spider with 5 human eyes. While in this shape, she also had the power to spit purple mucus and even fire optic blasts from her eyes. Makes you think there might be some Summers DNA mixed in there, which honestly, if we're talking about Mr. Sinister's lab, I wouldn't be surprised. She ended up rampaging across the city of New York after the Jackal released her as part of a test. Fortunately, she was apprehended by Superior Spider-Man and the X-Men, who explained that she seemed to be a mutant and ended up taking her in after defeating her. We never really heard anything about her after that. Spider-Girl was created by Christopher Yost and Paco Medina. Who knows, maybe we'll see her again, I don't know. Number 1. Forget-Me-Not. Despite the fact that Forget-Me-Not is someone you definitely forget, you may have heard us talk about him on the channel before, because his powers are just so interesting. But for those who haven't heard of him or have simply forgotten him, let's give you a little refresher course. Forget-Me-Not is an X-Men member whose mutant power is that no one can ever remember him. This makes it easier for him to basically infiltrate places, but it makes it harder for him to ever connect with anyone, make a friend, or even have his teammates remember that he's actually on the team. This is why Forget-Me-Not is also usually left off of the official rosters for the team, and why you might never really see his name mentioned there, ever. Forget-Me-Not's psychic powers that enable him to go unnoticed and remain forgotten were actually so strong that even Professor Xavier struggled to remember him, and as it was revealed in X-Men Legacy issue 300, had to place within his mind a psychic hourly reminder just so he wouldn't forget permanently about Forget-Me-Not's existence. If you're wondering what happened to Forget-Me-Not in the end, he was forgotten. So, yeah. Number 10. Binary. Carol Danvers as Miss Marvel ended up in a fight with Rogue that left her zapped of her powers and her memories. During the tussle, Carol was thrown from the Golden Gate Bridge, but fortunately Jessica Drew, aka Spider-Woman, showed up to save the day. Unfortunately, when Carol came to, it was apparent that her memories had been wiped. Spider-Woman reached out to the X-Men for help, and for a time, Carol Danvers became part of that team. Professor X was able to help restore Carol's memories, but her emotional attachments to those memories would remain lost. It was during her time adventuring with the X-Men that she would become binary after a space adventure with the team saw her cross paths with the Brood, who exposed her to an evolutionary ray that tapped into her latent potential. True story. Number 9. Longshot. Longshot is a paradoxal hero. He ended up joining the X-Men after being sent to Earth by Mojo so that he would forget all that had passed before that, like the part where he almost defeated Mojo. Without his memories, Longshot showed up in the X-Men's danger room and would end up befriending them and serving as an ally and a teammate. He is the father of Shatterstar, who he had with X-Men member Dazzler, but was also made from Shatterstar's DNA, creating a paradox and a strange time loop when it comes to his origins and his creation. Longshot got his name during his time on Earth, which was given to him because of his fighting style. Longshot always taking the long shot, the less likely, more desperate path of success in fights. Longshot, however, can do this as while not a mutant but being engineered from the DNA of one. He possesses probability altering powers which grant him a bit of luck. He also has enhanced speed, strength, agility, and endurance, which he often uses to fight with using throwing knives. Longshot is also known for his super handsome powers that cause many people he meets to instantly fall for him. And before we move on to this next spot, just a quick reminder, if you love X-Men truly as much as I love X-Men, then be sure to show that love by giving this video a thumbs up. It really does help us out here at the channel, so thank you if you already did that. Number 8. Surge. Surge grew up homeless on the streets of New York after running away from her home when her powers first manifested. Far away apparently, as she was born initially in Tokyo, and her parents still live there. Her powers cause her to absorb electricity from all nearby sources at all times, without the ability to stop, even zapping electricity out of the air. She can then discharge this energy through blasts or by using it to give herself bursts of super speed. Noriko Ashida's powers are hard for her to control and are considered volatile, which is why Beast created gauntlets for her that helped her to control them when she was later welcomed into the Xavier Institute, after initially being turned away. Number 7. Danger. Who could forget one of the most important members of the X-Men? The Danger Room. The Danger Room was a room used to help train the various members of the X-Men team, but was later revealed to be mutated technology which had evolved to become a sentient AI. So yeah, an AI mutant. Danger revealed their intelligence to Xavier when, after an upgrade and relocation facilitated by Mutant Forge, they asked, "Where am I?" Charles chose to ignore this and hide the room's sentience from the X-Men so that he could continue to use it to train his team. Pretty selfish, Professor. Danger is extremely powerful, and parallels between her and Ultron are often drawn on in the comics when it comes to all the destruction that she could be capable of. She possesses superhuman strength, stamina, and durability, as well as enhanced reflexes and agility. She can command and control other technology and use her own mass to recreate other materials and or rooms. She can also create other technology and even technological bodies if she happens to have mechanical devices, scrap, or equipment to work with. Number 6. Caliban. Caliban is believed to have gotten his name from that of the character from William Shakespeare's Tempest, often referred to as having a monstrous appearance. Poor Caliban, and also poor Caliban. Caliban is one of the members of the Morlocks, but he would later on join the X-Force and even go on to team up with the X-Men later on, despite him and the Morlocks being their frequent enemies in the past. Caliban's mutant powers increase the reaction of his fight or flight response, allowing him to manifest super strength as well as a sort of absorption and then later emission of fear. Basically, if you're feeling afraid in the moment, he can kind of like take that in and then put it back at you, or if he's feeling afraid. It's pretty useful. You're gonna be afraid, you know what I mean? These powers only appear when in this mode, however, when Caliban experiences that increase in adrenaline. He is also able to sense the presence of mutants within a nearby radius, and that's a mutant power that he has even when he's not in that fight or flight mode. Number 5. Blindfold. Blindfold is Ruth Aldine and is a possible descendant of Destiny. She was born without eyes entirely. Her mutant powers allow her to manipulate astral energy, tap into the astral plane, and grant her specific telepathic abilities, including precognition and clairvoyance. She also has the ability to manipulate chaos factors and alter events in order to achieve a desired result, and maintains a reality warp resistance. Pretty useful. She also has some telekinetic abilities as well. Much of her power was lost to her, and she was in rough shape when she was admitted to the Xavier Institute. She had lost half her power and had her mind shattered by her brother. Blindfold had a really rough home life, and her brother Luca ended up coming home one day filled with hate for his sister and prepared to kill her with a chainsaw. When her mother stepped in to defend her, her mother was instead murdered by Luca, who blamed young Ruth's freakishness for his own actions. Luca ended up getting the death penalty for this crime, but when he died, it seemed as though his own mutant abilities manifested, causing him to shift into an astral or ghost-like form and attack Ruth. Blindfold has a close connection to Legion and would later end up in a relationship with the son of Charles Xavier. Yay! I don't know why I'm celebrating that, but I just think it's kind of a cute romance, I guess. Number 4. Triage. Triage was one of the mutants to appear after the dispersion of the Phoenix Force. Christopher Muse discovered his powers when a friend of his fell and hit her head while they were out dancing. It seemed as though she was dead until Christopher's touch seemed to heal and revive her, bringing her back to life. Eventually, he was apprehended by the police because of his miraculous healing ability, but would later be freed and recruited by the X-Men. He was one of the mutants who was captured and later killed by One using the X-gene cure after he refused to use his healing powers to help them. Triage seems to have had eternal youth and immortality as a result of his powers, in addition to being able to heal others and even reanimate the dead. Fortunately, since his death, he is one of the mutants that we have seen return by the Five on Krakoa, with him being spotted in the comics at Krakoan hotspot, the Green Lagoon. Number 3. Darkwind. X-Men teammates really do come in all shapes and sizes. Coming to us from Asgard, we have Dani Moonstar's mighty steed, Brightwind. Remember when Dani joined the Valkyraur after she lost her powers following M-Day? Yeah, it was during that time that she met and bonded with Brightwind. After leaving Asgard and returning to Earth, Brightwind came with her, but instead became known as Darkwind on Earth. So that's why I said Darkwind at the beginning of this point. By extension, he became a member of the X-Men and New Mutants along with Dani. Cute. Number 2. Ariel. Ariel is an alien from the planet known as the Coconut Grove. Her mutant power is persuasion, but due to her alien physiology, she can also teleport. Ariel herself is also related to another Ariel who visited Earth and inspired the character of the same name from William Shakespeare's play, The Tempest. There's a lot of Tempest references in my list today. Ariel, the one we're focusing on with this point, not her ancestor, also ended up on Earth after being sent there on a mission to collect samples from the mutants of Earth for her people to study. They themselves had reached an evolutionary standstill as such and were curious about the Earth mutants and their evolutionary process. It was during her time on Earth that she would meet up with and join the Fallen Angels, and later on in San Francisco would end up meeting the X-Men team and joining them for a time. Number 1. Sunpyre. You know Sunfire, but do you know Sunpyre? Sunpyre was Shiro Yoshida's younger sister, Leu. She also had powers and an attitude similar to her brothers, and first appeared in Uncanny X-Men issue 392 in 2001. For those unfamiliar with Sunfire's or Sunpyre's abilities, both siblings possess the mutant ability of solar flare, which allows them to absorb solar radiation and convert it into superheated plasma. Using this ability, they could both cover their body in flame as they became like a flying, human-shaped sun. Sunpyre can use her power to emit plasma blasts and give off intense solar heat. Leu is one of the mutants who answered a psychic call to help defeat Magneto and save Professor X. After helping out the X-Men in that adventure, she'd later appear again as a member of the X-Corps. It is believed she died in action when the other members of X-Corps turned on her because Mastermind, Martinique Wingard, working in league with Mystique, was controlling them.
Number 10. Thunderbird. AKA John Proudstar, Thunderbird made his comic book debut in Giant Size X-Men issue 1, and during his childhood on the Apache Reservation in Camp Verde, Arizona, John wasn't like the other kids on the reservation. He grew up extremely strong and he became an athlete, and at just the age of 20 his mutant powers manifested when he wrestled a charging bison with his bare hands. That's a lot of strength. Now this earned him fame on the reservation, so much so that Charles Xavier caught wind of the young man through Cerebro and invited him to join the X-Men. The first mission John took was actually the rescue of the original X-Men from Krakoa. Xavier then gave him the nickname Thunderbird. Now Apocalypse experimented on Thunderbird and transformed him into the Horseman of War at one point. Now fortunately this didn't last forever as he broke free of Apocalypse's mind control and began getting his life back together. You can find all of this in Exiles issue 1. And before we go on to number 9, guys, if you haven't already, you can go ahead and give this video a thumbs up. It really does help our studio out a lot. You guys are the best. Thank you so much for supporting Top 10 Nerd. Now back to this list. Number 9. Wither. Making his first appearance in New Mutants Volume 2, Issue 3, Wither, aka Kevin Ford, grew up thinking he was cursed, or he was the most unlucky person on the planet. His mutant powers started to manifest, and he noticed it first in his plants and then on his clothes. See, his plants would die and his clothes would start to fade away. They would start to decay, almost wither away. Now we get it. Now his father tried to calm him down once he realized this, but coming into contact with Kevin, well, you could have guessed what happens. He was soon discovered and was invited to join Xavier's Institute to learn how to control his wild powers of organic decay. He got close with Wallflower, aka Laurie Collins, but in the House of M storyline, he touched her arm and crippled her. He ran away hurt and was soon met by Selene, the Black Queen, and she invited Wither to join her circle, and he gladly accepted. Number 8. Polaris. She's a powerful mutant who came to control magnetism, and she made her first appearance in X-Men 49 as Lorna Dane. But then in issue 97, she was Polaris. Cerebro identified her as a mutant when she stepped out of the shower and had green hair. So Iceman had a crush on her when she was part of the team, but she was in love with Havoc. Her powers are of course similar to Magneto's, but she lost them after the M-Day event as well. So when Apocalypse came into the picture, he also restored her powers as she was deemed the Horseman Pestilence. She was saved by her lover man Havoc and was also healed of Apocalypse's mind control. So again, didn't last too long, but definitely did see enough dark days. Number 7. Glob Herman. Glob Herman, aka Robert Herman, made his debut in New X-Men issue 117, and he grew up with a father who despised mutants a lot. So already we're off to a promising start. So when Glob mutated, his father was just not having it. So much so that his mother drove out Glob to Westchester and left him for Professor X. See, this mutation was interesting. His skin was this transparent living wax, which he's able to maintain being on fire, which is kind of cool. He runs with the New Mutants now, but at one point he did join the Omega Gang, led by Kid Omega, and they made their own stand for mutant rights. See, Glob wasn't a fan of the school, and he also had a grudge by the way that his father treated him. So he had a pretty harsh take on how to treat humans. Poor Glob. I mean, he had a rough childhood, not exactly his fault here at all. Number 6. Kid Omega. Okay, that guy that I just mentioned, of course, I'll fill you in a little bit on him as well and what gang that he was a part of. Quintavious Quinton Quirinius made his first appearance in X-Men issue 134, and he has been described as one of the most powerful telepaths, one of the most strongest mutants ever besides Jean Grey. He was once the host of the Phoenix Force as well, so that should give you an indication. He was one of Xavier's prized pupils until he put together the Omega Gang, which was a gang that takes out humans for the crimes they committed against mutants. He even went to a tattoo shop to get him and the gang tattoos of an Omega symbol to put over top of the X-Men symbol. So they weren't playing around here. I mean, at least try wash off tattoos first. I mean, give it some thought, you know, those things are forever. Number 5. Banshee. Making his first appearance in X-Men issue 28, Sean Cassidy was born as the heir to the castle and estate of Cassidy Keep in Ireland. Professor Xavier asked him to join the X-Men at the same time as Thunderbird, and they both stayed as members of the new X-Men. He went on to train the new generation of X-Men and Generation X, but was killed during Deadly Genesis when he tried to stop the Blackbird from crashing when it was taken over. Banshee remained one of the unliving until the Apocalypse twins resurrected him using the Death Seed, thus becoming the Horseman of Death himself. Later on, he ended up in the custody of the X-Men when Beast thought it was best to put him in a coma until the healing of Death Seed energy is complete. Number 4. Jubilee. Making her first appearance in Uncanny X-Men issue 244, Jubilee, aka Jubilation Lee, first discovered her mutant powers of generating this blinding and explosive blast from her hands. She was discovered by Dazzler, Cyclops, Rogue, and Storm during a rescue at the mall. And when she followed the women through the portal, she ended up at the X-Men's temporary base in the Australian outback. So she stayed there hiding, and then when the Reavers captured Wolverine and took over their base, she borrowed the X-Men's clothes and made a suit for herself. So she went and rescued Wolverine and aided him back to health. She's already an X-Men, look at that, just like that. So Jubilee and Wolverine ended up becoming a good pair, working missions together, and then a vampire ended up infecting the area of Union Square and Curse of the Mutants, and Jubilee, being caught in the path of this infection, ended up becoming a vampire herself. And in perfect harmony, she in the story ends up infecting Wolverine during her bloodthirsty time. And he was coming back to rescue her as well when it all happened. She's kept in a holding cell where Wolverine is really the only X-Men saying that they should keep her alive. So, rough times, rough times. Number 3, Tattoo. AKA Christine Cord, she made her first comic book debut in New X-Men issue 126. She's a student of the Xavier Institute, and she's known as Tattoo, well, because her mutation allows her to display messages or designs on her skin. And if that's not cool enough, she can phase through matter. So, coolest mutant ever, okay. She is also one of the Omega Gang members, and one time, her and the other members, led by Quentin Quire, started a riot at Xavier Institute during opening day celebrations. So Tattoo actually phased her hand into Cyclops' head, and then told him that if she became solid, he wouldn't survive to see the end of it. But then, Emma Frost reverted the trick by turning into Diamond, and then putting her hand into Tattoo's head to prevent her from taking out Cyclops. What a confusing sight to see. Superheroes are so cool. And at one point, she also attacked Beast and Wolverine, but she was being controlled by Cassandra Nova, so. Number 2, Rachel Summers. She's the daughter of Scott Summers and Jean Grey in an alternate universe on Earth 811, and she makes her first appearance in X-Men 141, the Days of Future Past story. So she was born from the Phoenix Force merging with Jean, so she got the abilities of a telepath and of a telekinetic. She was raised at Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters when she met Franklin Richards and became really close. Now one day the school was attacked by federal troops and she was one of the only survivors. She was taken in by the crazy Ahab where she was brainwashed and became the mutant Hound, where she used her psionic powers to hunt down other mutants. Her time as this horrible mutant hunter weighed heavy on her conscience afterwards. I mean, she even got her face marked up by these guys. It was just an all bad situation. And finally, number 1. Pyro. Pyro was once a student at the Xavier School for Gifted Youngsters, and in X2, we see him hanging out with Iceman and Rogue. By the end of the movie, he switches over to Magneto's side, facing off against Bobby. And in the comics, Simon Lasker makes his first appearance as Pyro in X-Men Gold, Volume 2, Issue 1, when Mesmero tricks him into believing he's Charles Xavier, and he joins the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. So not good on screen, not good in the comic books. Still a cool character, just likes to dip into the dark side.
Number 10, all-female X-Men. Oddly enough, this book didn't do as hot as expected, despite the fact that it was an awesome powerhouse team composed of all ladies. This team was first introduced in 2013's X-Men series in issue number 1, as one of the main X-Men teams, and the series was part of the Marvel Now event. The team featured Kitty Pryde, Rogue, Rachel Summers, Jubilee, and Psylocke, with Storm as the leader. This team was the first in the history of the X-Men to be an all-female team with its own book. So while it was not a commercial success, it's still an important part of X-Men history to be noted for sure. Number 9, Chuck Austin's Uncanny X-Men. At least, I kind of hope you've never heard of this one, because if you have, you probably just forgot about it after years of trying, and now I'm traumatizing you by bringing it back up. This is the team that featured Stacy X. Yeah. I like Stacy X, but I can also see why her character and this run were super problematic. Austin's run on Uncanny X-Men began in issue 410 and ran till issue 443. The problem here wasn't so much to do with the members of the team as the subject matter. Many people feel that Austin's run was hypersexual, and he also gave us the revelation that Nightcrawler's dad was Azazel, which honestly isn't that terrible, but then he also gave us the weird Draco storyline with the X-Men versus the NeoFem, which was something. It was a time. All in, this was definitely a controversial run, especially considering the relationship between Husk and Angel. The team was made up of Archangel, Beast, Iceman, Nightcrawler, Stacy X, Wolverine, and Professor X himself to start, but it would later on feature Husk, Polaris, Northstar, Juggernaut, and Havoc. Before we move on to this next spot, just a quick little reminder to click that like button if you haven't already, it really does help us out. Number 8, Children of the Atom. You might not have heard of this one because it isn't even out yet, but this is one of the new teams and books that we had expected to see earlier this year, but due to the global pandemic was delayed and is now delayed again. Originally it was moved to January of 2021, but now we aren't expected to see it till April of 2021. Boy, that is a long wait. But just because they aren't around yet doesn't mean we can't talk about them. And if you haven't heard of this team yet, you might want to keep your eye out for when their book is released. Children of the Atom is a team of new teen mutants who are basically X-Men superfans and are trained by these very famous original mutants. Technically, the X-Men team was never meant to exist in Krakoa, as was just revealed recently in the comics, despite them having their own book as part of the Dawn of X line. I know, it's a little confusing. So it'll be interesting to see how the Children of the Atom, who are being advertised as kind of X-Men sidekicks, fit in exactly. In a world where, you know, there's not really supposed to be X-Men? Well, we have yet to meet the members of this team. We do know some of them not only have similar costumes to the classic X-Men, but also have similar powers. Number 7, Hellions. No, not that Hellions. This Hellions. In fact, Empath's look in the new Hellions was a throwback to the original Hellions team outfits. Empath was also an original member of the team. Before we saw the team revived in Dawn of X, they were Emma Frost's team. Basically her version of a teenage mutant team similar to, well, the New Mutants. We're also a Teenage Mutant team. Every time I say Teenage Mutant team, I just want to say Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but that's not what we're talking about. Although they are also a Teenage Mutant team. In comparison to the new Hellions, these Hellions were not as crazy, but were somewhat troublemakers, who had an ongoing, sometimes friendly rivalry with the New Mutants themselves. The team consisted of Empath, Beef, Bevatron, Cat's Eye, Roulette, Taro, Thunderbird, Jetstream, and Firestart. The team was first introduced in New Mutants issue number 16 in the 1980s and was disbanded in 2009 in the comics after most of them were basically slaughtered, victims of a surprise attack. The team has returned since, but the new Hellions team only shares one member of the original roster, Empath. Number 6. X Corporation. Many people may have forgotten the existence of X Corporation since the organization was destroyed and became defunct back in the early 2000s, but they are coming back, so it's a pretty good time to remind everyone of their existence. Reminder, X Corp is still a thing. This actually just happened in the comics during the Empire event when we saw for certain that Xavier had revived the X Corp and that Monet and Angel seem to be running this branch of mutant affairs. X Corp in the past has been a non-for-profit organization working to help mutants in their fight for rights in less bold ways than what the X-Men are usually up to. It also provided a place of refuge for mutants who needed it, until the global organization had their various branches targeted and blown up around the globe following the events of M-Day. X-Corp will be getting their own book in the Dawn of X line, which I am way too excited about. I just want to see Angel get a moment in the spotlight, you know? Many believe the book to have been cancelled, but Jonathan Hickman actually confirmed early in December that it is still very much a go. Number 5. X-Men The End. In this series, we saw a bunch of teams kind of come together, ending in one big one, and Chris Claremont's The End. I like this X-Men team as well because although she died pretty early on in terms of her appearance here, we also get a shout out at least to Dust. And Dust is such an underrated X-Men in my opinion. This comic also introduces us to the future daughter of Bishop and Deathbird, Aaliyah Bishop. The final X-Men team features Kitty Pryde, Wolfsbane, Karma, North Star, Dust, Martha Johansson aka No Girl, the Cuckoos, Cyclops, and a subgroup known as the Heavy Hitters, which features Wither, Frenzy, Polaris, Juggernaut, and Kid Colossus. Number 4. The Upstarts. Speaking of young mutant teams that are lesser known like the Hellions, we also have their straight up not friendly at all rivals, the Upstarts. The Upstarts were definitely a more villainous crew in comparison to the Hellions, just in general, as their whole goal was to basically kill mutants. The Upstarts were a mutant team created by Selene, the Black Queen of the Hellfire Club. She put the team together in order to test the members, getting them to compete for points which would be awarded whenever they killed mutants, based on the mutants' power set. Originally, the young group of mutants involved were unnamed and were promised that whoever got the most points would win a prize, which remained a mystery pretty much through all of the comics that they were featured in. I bet it's cake, and I bet it's a lie. Although I think it was also mentioned at one point somewhere that it was immortality, so in case you were wondering, for realsies. Number 3. Battle of the Atom Future X-Men. While everyone might focus on the Battle of the Atom Future Brotherhood team, as Raze has a tendency to steal the show, plus My Girl Zorn Jean, and also featuring Molly Hayes, people tend to forget about the awesomeness that was the Future X-Men team. The real X-Men team. This team featured a much more skilled Iceman, who now was known as Ice Wizard, Wiccan, who had become Sorcerer Supreme, Chimera, who is believed to be Storm's daughter that she had with Black Panther, Shogo, Jubilee's son, known as Sentinel X, Colossus armed with Magic Soul Sword, Kid Omega as Phoenix, and Jubilee as Wolverine. Number 2. Extreme Sanctions Executive. The other XSE. This team also spiraled out of the team that we talked about previously previously on part 1 of this list, Extreme X-Men. XSE here stands for the Extreme Sanctions Executive. Similar to the original XSC that Bishop was a part of in the future, this team is also like a military police force meant to maintain and in some cases enforce peace is kept between mutants and humans. Storm was asked to create the team by the United Nations and eventually would increase its numbers by recruiting the rest of her X-Men, making this team another government-sanctioned mutant team, like X-Factor was, and still one of the first of those types of teams. Team members have included Bishop, Cannonball, Magma, Rachel Summers is on every team, I love it, Psylocke, Rogue, Sage, Wolverine, X-23, and Gambit. Number 1. X-Animals. If you're an intense X-Men fan, you may be familiar with Mojo's X-Babies, but are you familiar with his other attempts at recreating or recasting Marvel's 616 X-Men after they were believed dead? One such team that attempted to step in was the X-Animals. This was a team of, well, animals, who each took on the role of a different mutant member of the X-Men. We've got a skunk standing in for Rogue, a bulldog for Wolverine, a pig for Dazzler, a rabbit as Havoc, a cat for our Storm, which I kinda love, a bird, possibly a hawk as Longshot, an otter as Psylocke, and a gorilla as Colossus. Sadly, this team was not acceptable as a replacement in Mojo's opinion, and he got rid of them. But I'd love to see them return at some point, if that's possible. There are just so many X teams to keep track of and so many rosters. I think it can be especially hard when there are various X-Men teams operating all at once across like multiple different books and runs, and potentially timelines. It's a lot, and there's always stuff you're going to miss, which is why it's really fun to go back through history and see what you maybe missed out on at the time because you were busy reading something else. I honestly wish I could read every single issue of every single X book, but truly there is just not enough time in the day, but I can definitely try though.